And here we are, folks. Believe in Kentucky back for another episode alongside Aaron Gershon from the Cat's Paws, former UK quarterback Jalen Whitlow. My name is Vinny Hardy. Fellas, we are in here for an SEC play episode. It's finally that time. How we doing, man?
Good, yeah, man. Absolutely excited to get it going. I'm no offense to the other teams they've played, but I'm done with Akron. I'm done with EKU. I'm done with Ball State. I'm ready for 8 games in a row here of SEC play, and then Louisville at the end of the season. So it's all fun from here.
Yeah, it was time to, as far as the coaches say, maybe play up to the competition a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least 2 out of the 8 weeks for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what you talking about, Georgia and Alabama?
Yeah.
That Florida game just got a little more interesting. I know we were giving them
Missouri.
Yeah,
Missouri too. Yeah, though.
I watched the Missouri game closely.
I did too.
I was thoroughly impressed with their just resolve and their ability to make plays in the passing game. Missouri, they always do a good job passing the ball. They always got a good plan passing the ball. It always come down if they can stop anybody and run the ball and just stay out of their own way. But I think the SEC East, man, and I'm going to say this, somebody's going to beat Georgia, and I think that this thing is going to get wide open. This thing is going to be wide open, man.
The East is a stronger division from the, I won't say top to bottom, but
the Alabama effect.
Top to mid is because Bama's shaky. LSU is still doing what they're doing, but used to you pick Georgia in the East because they're back to back. Then you would start picking teams from the West, but I think the East might have the upper hand right now.
Yeah, you got to give credit to Florida for what they did on Saturday, and really taking it to Tennessee. That Joe Milton, we talked about it. We all kind of agreed that the wild card with Tennessee is. We all like Josh Heupel's system, but was it Hendon Hooker? Was a lot of it Hendon Hooker? And so far, it's looking like they're really missing that guy. And Joe Milton just doesn't have the accuracy that Hooker did. And they're struggling on offense. I believe I was looking at it. They're near the bottom of the league in yards per game, which is total offense, obviously, and points. Like Kentucky has scored more points than Tennessee. And there was a stat out there, I believe, it was either none or 2. I can't remember. But going into that Florida game, they had either 0 or just 2 passing plays over 20 yards. And that's one thing we've seen with Kentucky's offense be really good. It seems like it's an all or we'll get into it more, but it's like an all or nothing offense. But Tennessee is just struggling to have those explosive plays, which last year they could do at a snap of the finger with Hooker and Jalen Hyatt. So that's an interesting one. Credit to Florida for shutting them down and running the ball down their throats. They really did a good job, and Graham Mertz has done a good job managing the game for them. Even against Utah, I thought he played pretty well. So that game just got a lot trickier, I think, in Kentucky fans' heads going into next weekend, especially because it's at noon, and that kind of plays into Florida's favor. Missouri, like Jalen said, Brady Cook looks a lot better than he did last year because he was not a good quarterback last year. We'll see. Hopefully he's healthy, though. I know he hasn't been practicing this week. I believe they're playing Memphis in St. Louis. So that's not an SEC game, but Memphis is usually a pretty good team. So we'll see how they do this Saturday. And then, we know I still think Tennessee has a chance to rebound. And South Carolina showed a lot of guts in that first half. I'm very low on them, but you got to give them credit for what they did in Athens. And then, like Jalen said, man, Georgia, their defense is what it is. Their defense still looks like Georgia. I know they gave up 14 points in the first half, South Carolina, but Spencer Rattler's playing some pretty damn good football. You can kind of understand that. And then they hunkered down and shut him out in the second half. But, their offense has been a little slow out of the gate. So Kentucky's still going to play them on the relatively early side in a couple weeks. Maybe that plays into their favor to kind of have a similar game to South Carolina, or even be that team, like Jalen said, to knock them off. So it is really, really interesting what's happening in this conference, and I think it's pretty fun, honestly.
Yeah, I think I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the parity in college football, man. I'm sure y'all are too, but
absolutely.
I think, like you said, I think the SEC is wide open. I think Tennessee has a leadership issue. They have a production issue at quarterback, in my opinion. I don't think he runs the ball as good as Hendon Hooker.
No.
And he's definitely not as accurate as Hendon Hooker, So we're seeing that. And I think this week will tell us a lot. Don't sleep on the Missouri-Memphis game. I think Memphis could –
that's a sneaky game.
Memphis is not a bad team at all. They have a draftable quarterback. My little cousin plays for Memphis as well, so hopefully Memphis get that one.
Yeah, former Kentucky DB Joel Williams on that team too.
Yeah, so I think that'll be good. I think we're going to gather a lot of information from Vanderbilt, Kentucky.
Yeah,
we're going to gather a lot of information from Ole Miss and Alabama, no doubt. We're going to gather a lot of information from the Missouri-Memphis game, even though it's a non-conference game. We saw what BYU kind of did to Arkansas. Texas A&M, I think Texas A&M is going to end up having a decent season, in the West. But I think just the East, man, I think, Kentucky, Missouri, it's crazy we say this, but Kentucky, Missouri, Florida, I don't think South Carolina is going to be able to hang on.
I don't think so either. Rattler's doing a great job, but everything else is kind of
no doubt. Rattler's last about 6 games from last year to this year, he's been who we thought he would
exactly.
Be. I think he has. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. And he has a lot of more talent, but I'm anxious to see what happens, man. I think Kentucky has a real chance. They should be excited, man, because they got a real chance to really kind of make a run for this thing in the East, man, because I think a lot can happen.
Yeah, I just real quick, that's a great point. I saw someone on Twitter being concerned that the SEC was down, and what does that mean that Kentucky's not happy with their win so far? And I'm like, it's a good thing, man. It means it's wide open, and you've got time to figure it out this year, where in other years you don't. So obviously got to win. This is a must win if you want to have those goals for the season this weekend. So it all starts with Vanderbilt, of course, but it's wide. You're right. This thing is wide open. Even if you don't win the East, you have a really good shot to finish second this year if you can take care of the games that you should, and maybe squeak out a couple that many don't think you can. Maybe this is the year that you can finally get Tennessee. You have them at home. They don't look nearly as lethal offensively. They do look good in the run game, but Kentucky's really good at stopping the run. So maybe it's just a better matchup than years past. And then the one game that's kind of really interesting on this schedule, because I think the loser could end up really bottoming out, and we talked about them a little just now, is South Carolina, Mississippi State. Mississippi State looked terrible against LSU, and
yes, they did.
Yeah, and that offense, man, I was having this conversation. I don't want to go on too big of a rant. We'll talk about State later in the year. But, I just don't know why they decided to go away from the air raid when they still had the personnel for an air raid. I get if they eventually want to be a balanced offense, but Will Rogers is still there. All those wideouts are still there. Stick with it. Get an air raid coordinator for a year or two and then transition if that's what you want to do. I just don't think they've done. I just don't think Zach Arnett's done a good job so far, and that's a really tough spot. Obviously, he didn't expect to be in this role, but it's just how I feel about it. And then South Carolina had a really good half, and then Georgia did what they were supposed to do. This is a game where maybe South Carolina could build some confidence, but if they lose to this Mississippi State team, I just think they're going to bottom out. So that's a sneaky game in the conference this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Mississippi State. I agree with what you said, man. Whether you get a coordinator who's an air raid guy or not, I think whoever's that coordinator has to, kind of acquiesce to his talent. You got to. Right. I mean, what do you have talent wise is what you should do. Obviously, you got a quarterback who's comfortable in that system. You can still add more run game, but I would keep those concepts in my system if they've been that productive in the pass game. So that's just me. I don't, but you got coordinators who come in and they have their own way of doing things, and I get it. They believe in certain things, but I don't know. That's just kind of what I believe. Now, I do believe that the best team in the West is LSU. I know they got beat.
I don't think it's close.
By Florida State, but I think LSU is going to be an SEC championship game right now, in my opinion. I really do believe that.
And maybe, like you said, it's a tough spot for Zach Arnett. Maybe want to be a head coach at some point. It kind of got accelerated. Yeah. And do you want to put your print on stuff, but do you maybe you went too far into that and you kind of change it for the sake of changing, and you never done it before, and now you just kind of snowballed on him. And he's a defensive guy anyway. So, yeah. And getting back to Tennessee, though, just my thought, because this is a Kentucky podcast, but we talking all SEC because I mean, it's that time. Yeah, it's that time. The Hooker Milton thing, maybe it's kind of a reverse Levis Leary, because you're hearing all the stuff about down there. Hooker's ball was more catchable. He was more accurate. He wasn't built like Levis, but he ran a lot more than Milton does. Yeah. So it's just they're having a reverse of what we're having with transitioning from Levis to Leary when they're going from Hooker to Milton.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. Milton has all the talent in the world. I mean, we see you don't throw a ball 80 yards or whatever he could do on accident. I mean, he's got a ton of talent, but sometimes the touch isn't there. And you know what? They got to play their strengths too. I know that they obviously have this high-powered offense and they love to throw it downfield. And part of it last year too is Jalen Hyatt's pretty damn good. Like I know they have some fast receivers, Squirrel White being the fastest of them all, but like Jalen Hyatt was a different cat than the other guys that they have left, and even had on their – I mean, he was faster than Cedric Tillman. They couldn't do the things they wanted to do as much with even Tillman. So they have a great running back in Jalen Wright, and maybe I think the thing that can get Tennessee back on track is – and they have a better defense than they did last year too – is if they should take a page out of what Ole Miss did last year and keep the pace but run the damn ball. I think that's how Tennessee can win this year. I think you take it out of Milton's hands a little bit and throw it on the ground. I think Jalen Wright, he's second in the SEC in rushing right now at 296 yards in 3 games. So that's what I would do if I'm Tennessee, but I just don't know with how Josh Heupel is and, how committed he is to the pass. I mean, obviously in 21, he pulled Milton. Milton won the job. They went to Hooker. And they still kept throwing it, even though at that time it wasn't known that they didn't think Hooker had the arm that Milton did. And that's why Milton won the job. And remember, Hooker was recruited by Pruitt's staff, and then was inherited by Heupel, where Heupel's guy was Milton. So I just think that if Tennessee wants to get back on track, they got to run the ball. They have 2 rushers right now in Jalen Wright and Jabari Small, who are top 10 in rushing in the SEC, just like Ole Miss had last year with Judkins and Evans.
So, I mean, they didn't, were they not able to do what they want to do against Florida? It felt like they kind of got methodical for them, or took the air out of the ball for them from what we're used to seeing. Is that just Florida made them do that, or they're just not capable of the firepower from last year? Like, is it?
Yeah, I think part of it was Florida was getting them, and maybe Tennessee had a part to play in this too, was getting themselves behind the sticks. Yeah. When you get yourself behind the sticks, man, it's tough to use tempo because now 1st and 10, it's now 1st and 15 because you had a false start. Now you're 2nd and long, even if you get a little bit of yardage. So it's hard to get into that rhythm of tempo when that's happening. But I do give credit to Florida as well. Florida controlled the game by playing solid defense, and they ran the ball well. So everything I just mentioned kind of takes out your, offensive tempo, your rhythm, just the juice you want to play with on offense. It kind of takes it away when you're struggling to stay in front of the sticks due to penalties. They had turnover, which they usually don't have. That was Milton's first interception ever in the Tennessee uniform, I think.
Yeah, that's not his issue, is turnovers at all.
Yeah. So, and I think Florida got him, man. They did a good job. They got him.
Yeah, and Florida did what they did. Going into the year, the thing with Florida that everyone knew should have been their strength were those 2 running backs. I mean, Etienne, he looks like his brother. He's a beast. And then Montrell Johnson, and then their offensive line. They returned most of it from last year outside of the one who got drafted by the Bills, Torrance. So, they had a really good offensive line, and they had 2 elite running backs, and they used that to their advantage against Tennessee. So that's something to watch with Tennessee too. Their defense is improved from last year, but they could not stop the run whatsoever in that game.
As always, we're coming to y'all courtesy of the Believe Podcast Network. Go to Believe.com and get this podcast as well as many others that cover the SEC, all of our SEC brethren are on this network as well. For example, Jason Campbell does the Auburn podcast. Jay Graham played for Tennessee, coach for Tennessee. He's doing Believe in Tennessee now, just to name a few. So, they're covering other schools as well. We're also live on YouTube and Twitter. So get at us in the comments, interact, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff so you can keep up with us each and every episode. If you want to advertise on the podcast, feel free to do so. Reach out to us or the Believe Network. We'd love to promote your business or product on this podcast. Flipping back to Kentucky, one of the big things is Liam going to be upstairs. He's going to be back on the field. Jagger Burton, and you can see it on the broadcast. He was kind of beating himself up. He was a little rattled. He was in his head. He was shook. And the first game, I think everybody was kind of watching him close and didn't have anything as major as what we had against Akron. So then people kind of move on. Okay, all right, you don't have to worry about that. But then we had some issues with the snap, and so Yenzer was talking about it, and Eli Cox was talking about it. No doubt, Jagger's critiquing himself harder than anybody about it. So we'll see what they do as far as that goes this weekend too.
Yeah, that's a tough one. One thing that Yenzer said that was really interesting was that usually Stoops admitted that they'd had issues snapping during camp and in practice, and that's kind of to be expected when you're transitioning to the position. But what Yenzer mentioned is when they were seeing issues, the snaps were to the right or to the left. He was airmailing snaps on Saturday, and that's obviously really concerning. They got really lucky that Devin Leary made a perfect throw to Tavion Robinson on 3rd and 22. 3rd and goal from the 22. I mean, that was, I thought, his best throw. He's made some pretty good throws. I put that at the top of the impressive throws that he's made so far. And then obviously the other was a drive killer. And, you also had a false start and a holding penalty that took away that touchdown, 64-yard touchdown to Anthony Brown. So just things you can't have. And, Yenzer did say that, they feel comfortable plugging Jagger right back in at guard if they have to. And that's tough, though, because Eli Cox is playing at such a high level at right guard. He's clearly more comfortable there. Do you really want to do that? Or, if you have to move Eli back to center, wouldn't you rather Jagger just work from behind and not worry about guard in 2 positions and throw in Tanner Bowles, who you got from Alabama, who could play all 5 positions in there? So there's a lot of discussions that are probably being had. I'm really curious to see if anything comes of it. I still think it's going to be Jagger on Saturday, but it could be a last chance type of deal, or it could be a mid-game switch if there are more issues.
Take us back. And to the listeners, refresh everybody's memory. What was the big impetus? I don't know if rush is the right word to move Jagger to center.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was the logic behind that? What did they say when that talk was starting to happen? Just kind of refresh everybody on this, how we got here or how we started to getting here.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of something. It's kind of like. Last year, I think it was Yenzer who made a comment like, oh, yeah, like Eli, I see a center in him. And they made that move. And you look at Eli's last year and the snap issues weren't there, but maybe, the calls and protection, some certain things didn't go as well. He didn't have the production. He didn't have the protection and didn't produce as much as a run blocker as he did at guard. And I felt like they've always loved Jagger's athleticism, and they felt like he was kind of cut out for that position, and they wanted to get I don't know if it was more so they wanted to move Jagger or they wanted Cox to move back to guard more. I don't know what the emphasis was, which one it was, but clearly that's what they decided to do. I think they just felt like Eli was a mid-season All-American in 2021, and then he got hurt against Tennessee and missed the rest of the season. So I think they really, in my opinion, I'm kind of speculating, it was more so let's get Eli back to guard where we know he's dominant, and he's going to be a draft pick, I think. I mean, he's a guy I think is going to end up at the Senior Bowl and get drafted to be a guard. And I think that I really do think the move was more so to get Eli out there. And unfortunately, at center, they didn't add anyone in the portal, which I wouldn't say unfortunately, they just didn't. Whether they felt really good in Jagger, Tanner Bowles has experience there, but they didn't add a center for whatever reason. And Jagger's struggling more than they anticipated. So either out of necessity, they're going to have to move Eli Cox back if this continues, or again, I'm still confused on why we haven't seen Tanner Bowles yet. I just feel like I know he didn't start at all at Alabama, but he's so experienced. He's gone up in practice against so many NFL guys. Like that's who I'd give a chance first, because I really think if he can handle it, that's who should play center, because you got to keep Eli where he's comfortable, and he's dominating at right guard.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I think the center, the last place you want to have issues at is center.
Yeah.
I always talk to our kids a lot about the vertical alignment. The most important positions are obviously the two positions that touch the ball every snap, and sometimes the running back, right? You got to have those, the center, quarterback, running back, to have a solid foundation, in my opinion. So, like I said, the last place you want to have issues is center. Like you said, I'm sure they are trying different things at this point, even if it's not aggressive, even if it's not taking first team reps away from Jagger at center. They're probably trying Tanner Bowles and getting him more reps, getting other guys greased up, because like you said, you never know. If this thing continues in the Vanderbilt game, now you really have to make a decision. Not a decision. You got to make a move now, because you don't have time to wait to develop guys. You got to develop them, or you got to get them reps. So, and speaking of the Vanderbilt game, I do think this is a game. You mentioned it's a must-win. I think it's a game, not only a must-win. I think it's a game that you got to, and this is unfair to say, but you got to win convincingly almost. You got to not blow them out, but you got to win the game with a lot of confidence.
You got to feel good about it the whole time. I see what you mean.
No doubt. You have to win this game and be confident about how you played.
Yeah.
Because, after this, obviously, it doesn't get easier.
No.
So, you want to feel good about it, and you got to get that center position sold up. So I think it's a mental thing. He's obviously talented enough to do it. And like Yenzo mentioned, it's mental right now. It's just a mental thing that he gotta get through and just trust himself, man. And I don't know all the particulars in taking a snap or snapping the ball, but I do know the basics from just coaching. And he has to just trust himself to do the basics. And like Yenzo was saying, snap first, block second. The ball is the most important thing. So I think they'll find a way to get it corrected, whether it's him or somebody else. They move Eli back, they'll get it corrected eventually. But you don't want this thing to linger, because at the end of the day, just a snap being 4 inches off to the right or to the left may not seem like a big deal to most people, but from a quarterback perspective, it makes you take your eyes off the defense for a little bit longer, which throws off your timing in the pass game. So it's all a trickle-down effect. So we'll see how this thing plays out this week.
Yeah.
And it's funny how the schedule's laid out. Aaron's, we all tired of the non-conference with the Akrons and the Ball States. Then it's just a gradual step up. Your SEC play, but it's Vanderbilt. And then the next week you step up to Florida. Yeah. And the next week you step up to Georgia. So it's just weird the way these steps.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you started off with Georgia, LSU, and then dropped down to Vandy. It's just a gradual step. So you gotta play up to the competition. For the most part, there were some areas where a lot of people, Eastern game was too close, and it shouldn't have been that way in the second half, and not that kind of thing. So it's like we said, it's SEC play time now. Yeah. You got to get your stuff together, because the gauntlet's starting for everybody, and it's hard from here on out for everybody.
Yeah, and look, Vandy, they're not good, obviously, compared to the rest of the SEC, but they beat you last year, and obviously have their running back, but still, they beat you last year. You can't discredit that. And what's really interesting about this for Kentucky is the pass defense has been excellent. I know Parker McKinney is a pretty good quarterback. He didn't have the playmakers to make enough happen. Akron doesn't have anything at quarterback or the skill positions. And then I thought the kid who came in and played played pretty well for Ball State at quarterback. But again, Kentucky's pass defense, I think Maxwell Harrison's the 4th highest graded corner in the country right now. Like, he's playing lights out. Andrew Phillips is playing lights out. J.Q. Hardaway was the one that was struggling. He played lights out on Saturday. Vandy's biggest strength is they got 3 dudes at receiver. Will Shepard has 6 touchdowns already. He killed Kentucky last year. He's back. He's playing at a high level. London Humphreys only has 9 catches, but I think it's 240 yards he has. He's a burner. And then they have another wideout who's over 200 yards, and Jaden McGowan, he can line up anywhere. He can line up as a running back and make plays out of the backfield. He's a receiver, but he lines up everywhere. And he's like Barryon Brown, where he's a really good return man. So they've got dudes at receiver. And then they have Quincy Skinner, who hasn't done much this year, but if you remember, caught the game-winning touchdown and absolutely toasted whoever he was on a route into the end zone. So they got dudes at receiver.
Was it Harrison?
No, that was the 4th down play that went to Shepard.
Oh,
or did Shepard, or was it vice versa? You're right. It was you're right. It was Skinner on the deep ball that was Harrison, and then Shepard in the end zone.
Harrison just got subbed in, and they went
all
right at him.
Stoops had to do was call timeout. By the way, that's a different whatever. That's in the past. But look, Vandy's got dudes, and AJ Swan can throw it. So this is the first big test for UK secondary. So I am anxious to see how that goes, and then how Kentucky should be able to handle this defense. It's not a good defense. Their best player is an edge rusher, so you need to have a better game from Marcus Cox, who was pretty good the first 2 weeks, especially the second week. Last week, man, he whiffed so bad on that 1 sack, and that got Larry hit pretty good. So, they need a good game from him. So again, this is a win. Obviously, a game you should win, like Jalen said. Feel pretty good when you get out of there and beat them pretty good, but like they've got some dudes that can be a problem if you sleep on them, and you just gotta. This is still a big test. I know it's Vandy. It's in a construction zone. There's not much of a home field advantage going on, but like this is a trap game if I've ever seen one. And obviously, too, you have the human nature thing of looking ahead to Florida. So there's just enough to make you a little nervous with this Vandy team. But again, you should feel pretty good, and you should go out there and dominate. Because if not, there's going to be a lot of questions to be asked.
Yeah, that's true. Flipping back to Alabama, look, we sprinkle in SEC. We go to Kentucky. As a quarterback, Jalen, when you see them in a tooth and nail fight with USF, put yourself in Simpson and Milroe and all those guys' shoes as a quarterback. Word on the street, maybe Milroe didn't handle the news about his, not playing well, and that's why he didn't see the field a lot and all that. Put yourself in those guys' shoes. Got a new coordinator coming in. One dude, came from Notre Dame with him, so he knows him well, but none of them played well. I know it got rainy in the second half, but it was pretty when the game started. Just your thoughts on, is it system? What is going on? Because the coaching staff, Nick Saban has said to me today, let this cake bake. And if this is what you're pulling out the oven, so just your thoughts, man.
Yeah, I think I thought about this, man, and we were watching the game. I watched the game with some family. I was like, you know what? This is the worst Alabama football I've seen since I was in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
It was bad, and definitely from obviously an offensive perspective. I think this, man. I think they sat Milroe to make sure that the other two guys can always say that they got a fair shake at playing in the game to earn the spot. I believe they did that. There's no way you play arguably the best athlete. You don't play the best athlete on your team. Not only is he your starting quarterback, or he started the first 2 games, he's probably the best athlete on the football team playing quarterback. And not only do you, not start him, you don't even play him. He don't even have a package. So that was a clear message to me that he want to make sure he get these other 2 guys game experience, game reps, so he can really allow this thing to shake out and say, okay, this is what happened. This is the tape from practice. This is the tape from the game. This is the starter. This is the second string. This is the third string guy. I really believe he did that. So And he kind of alluded to the fact that he did that, Nick Saban in an interview. So, I think the whole debacle was kind of frustrating because I know how it is to have to rotate in with another quarterback and you never get your rhythm and you always got to, it's just a different feel than being the guy. When you're the guy, some guys, play worse when they're the guy. Some guys play better when they're the guy. Some guys stay the same, right? But I was always a guy who, I wanted to make sure that I was the guy because now, the relationship with your teammates, believe it or not, that plays a huge part in it. Not only you, but your teammates' relationship to you, because it's human nature comes into fact. Everybody's in a locker room. You as a receiver, you don't want to feel like you're catering to a certain quarterback because you got two other quarterbacks that are battling for the same spot. It's just it's a lot that goes into it, man. It's a real weird dynamic. So, I think they have issues. I don't like to blame coaches, but I think one thing that I noticed that when they played Texas, they weren't really playing to Milroe's strengths. Milroe is not Tyler Buckner. He's not, Ty Simpson. He's a unique athlete who has to have the offense kind of cater to his skill set, which everybody does, but especially him because he's the guy who can who can work outside of the pocket. He's the guy who can run the ball, design runs, just moving the launch point. I mean, there's so much you could do with him just based on his speed, and he obviously has the best deep ball out of the two. I'm not saying he has the best short to intermediate game, but his deep ball is pretty good. So you can do a lot of stuff. I think the stuff that Texas was doing with what's the kid name? Quarterback.
Quinn Ewers.
Quinn Ewers, like the half roll stuff, the naked stuff, getting them on the move, changing the launch point sometimes, stuff that Alabama should have been doing with Milroe. So I just think that whole thing was very weird to see. But I think Nick Saban was trying to he was getting at something with he had a method to his madness on last Saturday, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the big thing with Alabama, going into the year, they were supposed to have a pretty darn good offensive line. Oh, my God. They've allowed 12 sacks. To put it in perspective, that per game, that's 4 per game. That ranks 123rd in the country right now, tied with Hawaii and Houston for sacks per game. Akron, who we saw Kentucky get 5 sacks on, has given up 13, and same with South Carolina, who's looked dreadful on the offensive front. They've allowed 13. So Alabama's only allowed 1 less than those 2 teams. It has been a struggle to protect whoever's back there, and that has obviously hurt them in the run game too. So it's just shocking what's happened. Like there was definitely a case for Alabama to finish, second and not win the West behind LSU. Maybe could even make a case for A&M, with all their 5-star talent and whatnot. But I don't think anyone expected it to be because they're getting out physicaled by a USF team that went 4-29 the last 4 years. We're not talking like a Miami, Ohio, who's usually like a 7-win team, or some of these MAC schools. We're talking about a team that was as bad as anyone. They're like Akron. They are literally Akron of their conference. So that was just I couldn't believe it.
Now, when you look at Miro from a quarterback perspective, Jalen, best athlete, athleticism, undeniable. As a passer, as a quarterback, as they run the offense, the whole package of a quarterback, what do you see? Do you see a guy that just needs more reps? Do you see a guy that, you like to say that have an offense to cater to him, but is he a guy that needs to work on reading defenses better, or where is he at in his journey as a quarterback from where you sit?
Definitely need more reps. I think he's a guy who needs the time in the saddle as the quarterback of the University of Alabama.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. You cannot start a guy for 2 games, and he didn't play bad against Texas. Am I watching a different game than everybody else?
I didn't think so either.
He had one not good decision where he stared the guy down and the guy picked it off.
Yeah.
Whatever. But he did not play bad against Texas. He set a record against Middle Tennessee. He set a record for quarterbacks at Alabama rushing and passing touchdowns in a game. He set a record. Second game against Texas, he gets sacked. Every time he gets, not every time, majority of the time, it seemed like he took the ball to take a drop in the pocket, and there was leakage from the time he touched the ball. So somebody find me a quarterback who can operate in that environment, and I'll find you a Heisman Trophy winner. You just. What do you expect? At the end of the day, yes. Did he play great? No. Did he make some mistakes? Yes. But did he play well enough to retain his position as a starting quarterback? Yes, he did. I think the talk and the chatter behind the position of quarterback at Alabama kind of got to Nick Saban a little bit, to where he had to make a decision and say, hey, all right, let's give these other guys a chance in the game so people can see who they are. They knew who Tyler Buckner was as soon as he stepped foot on campus at Alabama. Yeah. I could have made a couple of those throws with my left hand. He looked terrible, man, and I hate to say that, but he looked bad. There are a lot of quarterbacks who can do a lot better than what he did, and it just is what it is, guys. The tape don't lie. I'm not trying to be about the guy, but it just looked bad. Tyler Simpson can be a good quarterback. I just don't know if he can be a good quarterback right now for what they need. No. I just think with the leakage up front, Milroe's ability to escape, his athletic ability gives them the best chance to win. And they have to play to his strengths. And, I don't think he has an issue reading a defense like people are making it out to be. Everybody has issues reading the defense when you're under pressure. Everybody does. Try stepping back there under some pressure. Now, is he, Peyton Manning? No way. But he's not. I don't think he played as bad as people are making it out to be. I was watching the same game that everybody else was watching, and I was trying to find where's this terrible quarterback. I couldn't find it. Yeah. I was actually trying to look for it, and I couldn't find it. So he's a guy that needs to be the quarterback, and they got to take their lumps with him. But you also got to play to his strengths, because he can win you games with his ability. I really believe that.
Yeah, there are only two theories I have for why he was benched. And also real quick, Texas has a damn good defense too.
Exactly.
Like they can play on both sides. Like I know they had trouble with Wyoming, but that's because their offense didn't get going until the fourth quarter this week. Their defense was fine. So, you got to also take that into account. But I think there's only two theories. One, there was that, there's suspensions that happen where you can kind of pick a game and not say like a guy was suspended. That was a theory I saw floated out there, and maybe that has some legs. I know, for example, to bring it to Kentucky, Trayvon Ripka didn't play the first game. Mark Stoops was asked about it. He said it was something else. Probably in a suspension that was whatever. Not going to speculate why. One of those, okay, he sits his game, done, bye-bye, over with. But so it could have been that. And then the second thing is, obviously, Buckner is Reese's guy, Tommy Reese, the offensive coordinator. And maybe he was just able to talk himself into giving his guy a shot against a lesser team. That's the only two theories I can think of. Because like Jalen said, I didn't get to watch all of Texas, Alabama because I was still at Kroger Field. But I did see enough and see some of the good plays, including, I think, a 39-yard touchdown that Milroe threw. I didn't see a bad quarterback. I saw a guy who, like Jalen said, needs reps and can eventually be a pretty good one, especially if there's some protection. And obviously he's a guy who can get out of the pocket and make things happen on his feet. So that'll help him in that situation too. But if he has protection and time, I think he can be a decent thrower too. So I didn't understand it. Those are the only two theories I have, but I was glad for the kid, Milroe, that being, of course, that they are going back to him this week. He's going to start against Ole Miss and be their guy. So we'll see. That is a really interesting game. If Ole Miss, because Lane Kiffin's, I think we all like Lane Kiffin. I love his personality, whatever. But he has struggled in big games throughout his coaching career. So if he can go and get that one against his former boss, that's a huge win for Ole Miss, and it could be a sign of it could really spiral for Alabama. So it's going to be interesting.
And Alabama's not in position to, unless they miraculously fix a lot of stuff this week, they're not in position to be in a shootout with Ole Miss. So,
have you guys seen how Jackson Dart is playing? He's playing like the best quarterback in the SEC. I'm not saying he is because they've only played – Tulane's pretty good, but still they haven't gotten into SEC play yet. But right now he's probably your first team All SEC quarterback.
Yeah, I think if there was ever a time to beat Alabama, is right now.
Yeah, you got to get them. You got to get them. That's why, like, if you're Kentucky, man, this is the year to have them on your schedule. Like, and especially being senior day at home, like it is. The stars are aligning for that to be a special night in Lexington. I'm not calling it at this point, but it is this because I got to see Kentucky play better first. But even though I think they played pretty well, and I want to get into that too. But I don't know. Things are happening. That game is a lot more interesting than I thought when I saw that Kentucky's last home game of the year would be Alabama.
I mean, Georgia is too to me, man. I don't think that Georgia's invincible this year.
I think you can compete there for sure.
Yeah, when I watched them, man, I know they play at Georgia, but when I watched them, I was like, man, this team has some holes, man. This team isn't, and I say that, but we're so caught up in seeing them, the past 2 years, and they had arguably the best defense in college football history in 2021. And I mean, 2022, they weren't far behind that. So, but I do think, I think this thing is wide open. Like I said, and I said this before the season, I was like, I wouldn't be shocked if there is no undefeated SEC team, and there may be one or two SEC teams, maybe one, with one in-conference loss. And, that may be the case, man. May be the case.
It's crazy. There is a possibility, even if it's a one-loss Georgia, like the SEC could get left out of the playoff if things don't start getting better. Like it's possible because you got. I think we'll see what Texas. I think they're going to be able to run the table and win that Big 12 and do it with either one loss or none. The Pac-12 is, goodbye for after this, but they have those are good teams like Oregon and especially Washington. Like those are some real legitimate contenders, and then Ohio State and Michigan are going to be in the mix, and then there's a wild card because Notre Dame, they have a quarterback. You have Notre Dame, who's usually pretty good, and now you had a really good quarterback to them. So if they beat Ohio State this week, they're in the playoff hunt. So, and then Florida State, obviously. So there's a lot happening where if the SEC doesn't get its act together, even a one-loss Georgia, if it's not conference champion Georgia, could be in trouble.
Interesting.
I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think Georgia's going to be in the playoff in the end, and I wouldn't be surprised. If LSU ends up not losing again, they'll be in the playoff too, or they'll be in the playoff and Georgia won't, whatever. But I'm just saying it's possible for the first time ever. It's the first time the SEC has to worry about that.
Yeah, been a long time since they've been in that spot.
It's never happened. They've never been in that spot.
Yeah, the conference. Yeah.
Since the playoff era, they've either had two or one. So we'll see.
And Georgia's schedule still is very friendly. They can kind of lean on that through whatever adversity, through whatever chinks that we're seeing in the armor. The fact that and the schedule is their friend. If you want a three-peat, they couldn't ask for a better schedule. Because they had some personnel changes. Stetson's gone. Carson Beck is in. Sure, he's got a lot of weapons, but that doesn't guarantee he's just going to step in and light it up. But that schedule is friendly.
Yes.
They still might not. Somebody might trip them up. It could, we've seen teams go for three-peats before. Y'all were kids, but the USC squad that lost to Texas, I just knew they were about to get a three-peat. And Vince Young had other ideas. So we've seen this before.
The problem with, say Georgia does go 12-0, what would be super interesting is if they lose the SEC championship game, especially to LSU. And then you look at around the country and you have all those teams I mentioned that have resumes that are comparable. What does the committee choose? Because the Pac-12 is seriously loaded. Like UW or Oregon, they're going to have a damn good resume if they're one or no loss. Like no loss, they're in. But if they're one loss, like USC was going to get in last year if they beat Utah in the Pac-12 title game. If they are that and win, like if UW or Oregon has one loss, like they're getting in this year. Like it's going to happen. And then Texas maybe. Oklahoma still, I don't think they're that good, but who knows? With their schedule, they could run the table with Texas in the Big 12, and then it could come down to the winner. Like it's just for the first year ever, there's enough parity across the country. I think thanks to the portal, thanks to even the play clock a little bit, that there's a playing field level, and the SEC has to sweat a little bit for the first time ever. Greg Sankey has to feel a little nervous about what happens at the end of on Selection Sunday.
And when you're the standard and been the standard for all these years, because if the Big Ten had done what the SEC has done, they'd be strutting around and be unbearable and flexing too. But everybody been gunning for you for decades.
Yeah.
Oregon's coach came from Georgia, so that deflection, stuff like that. Just like USA basketball used to destroy everybody, and then the world started closing the gap, catching up. The Golden State Warriors smoking everybody. Everybody eventually, between the wear and tear of trying to sustain it and everybody gunning for you, it's eventually
Patriots, Alabama,
everybody. So now after 25, 30 years of the SEC,
well,
head and shoulders above everybody, here comes the other conferences. Well, we got to catch up. We got to finally,
news is, Texas might be one of those teams that take a spot. They'll be in your conference next year. So.
It's true.
So we'll see.
And who would have ever thought they would be bona fide or in position to do anything coming in? We're like, man, they're gonna drag us down coming in, but they look like they got their stuff together right now. But
I'm telling you, the team that I have a crush on is Washington. Like they are legit, dude. Penix, that offense is fun, man. Every time they touch the ball, they're scoring. And I know they haven't played a great schedule yet. I mean, they got Michigan State at literally the best time you could ever get a team, and they went in there and kicked their ass. So you got to give them credit for that. But it's going to be they got Oregon coming up on the 14th. They play USC on the 4th of November. They have Oregon State, who's ranked, Utah, who's ranked, Washington State, who's ranked. If they come out of that undefeated, that's a playoff team, whether they win the Pac-12 title game or not. That offense is – Michael Penix is – I'd have to look at the numbers, but I would assume he's number one in the Heisman race right now. And their defense has played pretty well, too. They've allowed 19 points, 10, and 7. That'll do. So, I don't know, man. They're fun. They're a very deep sleeper.
And Mel Tucker, what are you doing, man?
Oh, my God. Mel Tucker. You know who – I don't want to make a joke of a serious situation, obviously. But you know who's got to be happy they stayed put where they are?
Big dog.
Vince Marrow. Yeah. He's got to be he made the right choice whenever that whole thing happened where Michigan State tried to get him, I guess, the year that Tucker took over. So
Mel made a serious run. I mean, it
was close. It was close.
Bad.
Yeah, and I already saw Mark Stoops' name, of course, being on the candidate list that the media I'm guilty of it. I guess I'm part of the media, but you know what I mean. Look, there might be a job that comes up, when Nebraska was one, even with their history, that I could have saw Stoops taking an interview. Obviously, Florida State a couple years ago was definitely one that you would have sweat a little bit. Whenever Iowa happens, you're going to sweat. Mm-hmm. Michigan State is not a better job than Kentucky right now. It's just not. They're in the Big Ten East where Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan talk about catching up. That's going to take 5 more years. They're running away with the thing. The Big Ten West sucks, and they're not splitting the division. I don't think they're getting rid of division play. When the Big Ten West sucks now, and then they're going to add USC, Oregon, and the other schools. And I don't think, and Washington and Oregon, I don't think they're splitting them up. I think they're keeping the division. So it's just there's no path at Michigan State. Kentucky, there's more of a path, and there's better recruiting. It's just he's able to recruit Michigan to Kentucky. He doesn't need to move up there to go recruit. It'll be fine. So Mark Stoops is not going to Michigan State. I mean, if Michigan opened up and he was a legit candidate, okay, yeah, I'm sweating because Michigan can win. Michigan State, man, this is not basketball.
This is the year for Michigan to finally kind of take.
I know. I was talking about that. Michigan, if you're Michigan, you better win this damn thing this year, or else you're never going to do it. And they don't look that good, by the way.
They didn't last Saturday. However, I do think 2 years in a row, Joe Moore Award. Good quarterback coming back. He didn't play good last Saturday, but the previous 2 games he was on fire.
You'll get Harbaugh back.
Solid running backs, really good running back, I should say.
Corum's a beast.
Good defense, really good defense. I think this is the 3rd year in a row that they beat Ohio State, and I think they kind of forced Ohio State's hand to fire Ryan Day.
That would be. Can you imagine? How many games has they lost? I know he's lost 2 to Michigan. How many games has he lost total?
Maybe 6.
Like 7? I'm gonna look right now. I know Georgia in the playoff last year, which they give him a lot of credit. They played great in that game. And they lost the playoff game to Clemson. I'm trying to think of what other losses he's got.
It's not how many.
Lost to Bama national championship game.
Yes. So that's
Michigan.
He's
twice.
You nailed it. He's 48-6.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, man. Like if
Ohio State is the most scrutinized college football program.
Yeah.
You're always on a hot seat at Ohio State, especially if you lose to Michigan 2 years in a row, which I really believe that this year may be 3. And I
think it will be.
I almost believe that Notre Dame is going to beat them Saturday. So I think it's going to get spooky for Ohio State this year.
Mm-hmm. Hey, and those high-profile football jobs, it's not even how many games you lose; is who you lose to, or how many you lose to your ranked rival. I think it was Bill Curry ran from Alabama because he was losing to Auburn too much, and he was solid at Alabama before he came to Kentucky. And look, you losing 2 or 3 to Auburn, you got to go. Ryan Day, man, you won 90% of your games, but you lost 3 in a row to Michigan. You got to get up out of here, bro. We can't have that. So because Michigan, Brady Hoke and whoever else.
Brady Hoke and
Lloyd Carr,
Rick Ramirez. Is it
Rich Rodriguez?
Rich Rodriguez, thank you.
Lloyd Carr. All those dudes came in and couldn't beat Ohio State. Harbaugh was about to get ran until he pulled a couple out of his behind, and now he got his stuff back on solid ground. And now Ryan Day might be in the unemployment line, man. That's how it is, man.
I think that Michigan train is on the tracks, man. It's rolling now. I really believe that. I think it's rolling. I mean, 2 Joe Moore wars in a row.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I mean, you got a quarterback. This is by far his best team. I think most complete team. I would be shocked if they didn't run the table and go into the playoffs undefeated. Yeah. I would be shocked. I just don't see anybody beating them, man.
And there ain't who's going to win that Big Ten West is more like who's not going to lose it. Like, it is such a bad division. And, obviously it should get better with how they do things and, the teams from the West Coast coming in. But, like, this year, man, who's the best team in the Big Ten West? Or who's not the worst team is the better question. It's just, it's bad.
I mean, you may see an Indiana win the Big Ten.
Wow, that'd be gross. I think it's going to be Iowa, but not because of their offense.
And we were talking about Iowa. I think if Iowa came open after the season, I don't think Stoops would leave for Iowa.
No, it's just it would be one to sweat because he. It's his alma mater. Yeah. And obviously, a lot of family played there. That it would make. I'd put it on the make you sweat list. I don't know if it would be a take immediate type thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Iowa's
I agree. I think Kentucky's the better job. My 2 things with Iowa would be, again, the history, and 2, they've left. Ferentz has done a lot of good. They've obviously run the offensive game into the ground. So you have ultimate job security if you're keeping a guy like that for 20 plus years. But you kind of have that at Kentucky. Mitch Barnhart has done a great job at just letting Stoops do his thing, not rushing to judgment when he easily could have after 3-4 years. So it's interesting. I don't think it would be as much of a slam dunk as it might have been a couple of years ago. But it would make me sweat if I'm Kentucky.
I think I agree with you on that. Is with each passing year, the probability gets less and less because
that's what I'm thinking.
He's 56, 57 years old. He's mid to late 50s now. It's Mark Stoops.
I think he's 54.
I think he's like 56. I think
he's mid 50s.
And he's 56. I'm off, man.
Yeah. So you put all that in, and then you want to go start over and take 4 or 5 years, and then you're pushing 60. Another point too, I don't think he would go to Iowa, but the Stoops family legacy and the ties to Iowa and all that. I mean, it's a special place in his heart. That's where he played and all that. My co-host TB on Cats Talk Wednesday, y'all know Terry. His wife is from Iowa. He's moved out there, and he makes a good point. He's like, don't sleep on the money out there in Iowa. A lot of people want to think Texas and all that. He said, look, I was known for corn. He said, corn is everywhere. Corn is in your food. Corn is in the gas.
How do you think Nebraska pays all these coaches?
Yeah.
How do you think they pay all of them?
Look on the ingredients of everything you pick up at the store. Corn is in it. He said, so it ain't like they couldn't cut some checks or at least, like you said, to make you sweat. Money, they could get some money here too. Kind of like SMU. They're not getting ACC money. They don't care. The boosters are already raised $100-200 million down there and making it rain. We go into a conference for free, but the boosters are going to support that program. It's crazy.
It is crazy. And I guess, and two, the other job that really would make you sweat, and it might happen again because I'm not sure they have a great coach right now, but I think, what happened at Oklahoma happened so fast where if they had gone, I just think they went really quick with Venables as soon as I think they just, Venables was a guy for whatever reason. But I think the next time they're open, they have a full search. That one could get interesting too, obviously, because of what his brother did there and, another family tie one. But again, I just think it would take the perfect situation and the perfect money to pull him at this point. I guess I was off on his age. I guess he should take that as a compliment for me that I thought he was younger. But it's interesting. It's always an interesting conversation. But
and he, we don't know what his mind and heart is, but you speak of Oklahoma. And his brother, Bob, retired early, and maybe because of what happened to his father. We know what his father...
And that could happen here, too.
And Mark might not want to stay in it for long either because, that...
And also just... I just feel like we already... call me crazy or a conspiracy guy, but when Brad White rejects all of these really good jobs, it almost feels like you're having coaching waiting with him, possibly. And also John Summerall, when... He's going to be a name on the market every year with what he's doing at Troy. And obviously Kentucky's his alma mater. Did some really, really good things as an assistant here. So you have some candidates who I could see Mark, if like you said, with his brother retiring earlier, if he wants to go that route eventually, like he has some guys he could hand the job off to where, I don't know if obviously that bit Kentucky the last time it happened, but I think it's a little different. I think it's a little different now with the guys I just mentioned and how they've recruited for Kentucky. I mean, some of the guys John Summerall has pulled are the reason why they're in this spot. And then Brad White is obviously a highly respected defensive coordinator who has done just a remarkable job. So I think that's an interesting one too. I've always thought about that. And, maybe Liam Cohen enters that conversation one day too. But again, hopefully, he's got plenty of time here left. He's obviously done an amazing job with this program. We wouldn't be talking about Kentucky football like this every week, honestly, if it weren't for what he's done here.
Yeah, and for y'all UK fans, we're working in all the other sports as well, but it's just football is rolling right now.
It's the season, man.
And keeping with that, you mentioned, Brad White and everybody that Summerall brought in and kind of left the cupboard full, even though he went on to Troy. We had two, the Smith twins at Corbin flipped from Michigan. Speaking of Michigan, flipped from Michigan to Kentucky after Corbin beats Douglas down at 6-0 and a defensive masterpiece.
It was Iowa, Kentucky.
But you get two, and for the state of Kentucky, who still doesn't produce talent on the level of other states, twin studs. Corbin, hopping a jump from where I'm from, hour and a half from where I grew up in Harlan County, and two D-line prospects that are going to be, committing to the Cats. So, they win. They beat the big city school, Douglas from Lexington, and then they flipped to Kentucky. I mean, you just couldn't script a better Friday night for those two young fellas.
Yeah, and they've I'm trying to pull it up right here. The thing that's really important about obviously getting those guys is huge, and they've in Jeff Brom's first year, and this is year one, so I'm not going to say they've shut him out, whatever. But the top 3 players in the state per 247 all committed to Kentucky. The number 6 player, the number 8 player, the number 9 player. So, and Louisville's got the number 5 prospect. So overall, you've cleaned up on your home turf in year one against Brom head to head. Again, it's just year one, and Kentucky obviously got a head start on these guys. Brom was still at Purdue until December, but I think that's really important to clean up the top talent in your state. And like you said, Vinny, it's a football state that's getting better. It's not Tennessee yet. It's not Georgia. It's not Florida. It's nowhere near those guys yet, but it's getting better. And you got to clean up. That's where it all starts. I mean, you look at Kentucky's roster right now. Dane Key, one of the most important players who obviously needs to get going a little bit. Jagger Burton, we talked about him at length earlier. Really important player for this team, both from Lexington. To Kel Crowdis, who I still think needs to play a role in this team, from Kentucky. There's a lot of Octavius Oxidon, J.J. Weaver. There's a lot of Kentucky guys on this team that play important roles, and you got to clean up your home state. And Kentucky has done a really good job this cycle in doing so, especially, the Smith twins. I think Cutter Boley is going to be a starting quarterback for you soon, like in the next 2 years soon. And then Willie Rodriguez looks the part too. So, really important to clean up at home.
Yeah, so it's just to see it on this upward trend statewide, and me being from the mountains, the small towns in Kentucky, to see it be kids outside of Lexington and Louisville, nothing against the city, and the small town and Louisville always kind of look at each other sideways, and especially when it comes to a good kid coming out of the mountains. Well, they haven't played anybody, or if they play somebody from Lexington, they'll get shut down. It's always been that kind of yak back and forth. So it's good to see kids from all over the state, being on Kentucky's radar. Cash Daniels from the mountains, and he went in and did his thing and played.
Yeah. So Eli Cox, I know near Lexington, but Nicholsville, West Jessamine guy, and Drake Jackson was obviously a Versailles guy. So I know they're close to Lex, but still playing at the smaller schools in smaller counties. So it's always fun to see them attack the home state.
For sure. Sure. Man, was there anything else you wanted to get to? I know you mentioned a couple things.
Yeah, I would just I think we could hit it more. We'll have a better field next week. The last thing I just want to say real quick is I still saw people upset with the way that Devin Leary's played, and I was listening to the Sirius XM show and how Leary's disappointed so far, and I just don't get that, man. Like I just don't. I'm sorry. I know the first half of the first 2 games weren't great, but there has to be some sympathy for the fact he hadn't played a game since October 8th or whatever it was of last year. It's not like he played up until January for a bowl game. Like he was done for the year rehabbing. Like this is a guy who didn't play any football for 11 months, give or take, game football. So, and then last week, man, some of the throws he made, I mentioned the one to Tavion on 3rd and 22, the throw to Dingle that ended in a fumble, unfortunately, but amazing catch. That ball was in a perfect spot. The pick was Dane Key's fault. I think 10 out of 10. You got to turn around. Maybe Leary puts it a little right because maybe he's anticipating Dane gets to the spot quicker. But Dane Key turns around, at least it's on his fingertips, and it's a drop instead of a pick. Like that's on Dane Key, and was alluded to multiple times this week that it was on Dane Key. There's been drops that have cost them some plays, but some of the throws he makes, I'm not even going to get into the play he made on his basically going down to the ground and getting out to the Ray, but the way he's able to extend plays, the way he's able to step up in the pocket and make really good throws, like I think they're averaging 9 yards per play in the passing game. These aren't short passes. Last year was a lot of quick game, a lot of screens. You're not seeing that. They're able to throw the ball downfield because Devin Leary is so damn good at it. And I don't think he's been perfect. I mean, 3 picks. And again, I don't think one of them was his fault. I think the other 2 were. It's not good enough. That's 1 per game. You can't have it. But man, he's done really good things. Yeah, I just don't get the argument that he's been disappointing so far. I think maybe hasn't exceeded expectations, but he's been the guy that that's been advertised. And I think as he gets more comfortable, you obviously need the offensive line. I think they've done pretty good in pass protection. Last week, I thought was their worst game in pass protection yet. So you got to get a little better there. But I don't get the whole Devin Leary's been disappointing thing. That's just not how it's been. I've watched every snap. He has not been disappointing. Will Levis last year, before and after the injury, was disappointing. This guy hasn't been.
Yeah, what do they want, man?
Exactly. What do they want? He's not going to be Tim Couch. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's not how the offense is built either. Like, I don't get it. And this is not only Kentucky fans or coaches, whatever they want from them. I'm looking at a lot of other fan bases too, man. I'm like, what do you want? I mean, like, what do you expect? Like,
just like we talked about with Milroe. Like, what did you expect? I know it's Alabama, but it's 2 games.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
The same people that were probably disappointed in Larry or feel that he hasn't lived up to the billing and all that were probably the same ones, just like everybody else, holding their breath when he went down when he got the wind knocked out of him.
Yes.
So, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Can you imagine if they lost Larry in that situation or if they lose him this week? Then what are those guys going to say?
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Kaya or any of the backups. It's just like Devin Leary is a good quarterback. And the way he's played so far is an upgrade to what they had at the position last year. That's the facts. So I think it would be big for him and big for the fan base if he could just go out and play 4 quarters and dominate this Vandy secondary that's just got toasted by UNLV.
No doubt.
Hopefully it plays out just like that this Saturday. You
At
get
the
a
construction zone.
press box seat. Take your hard hat, Aaron.
I know, right? Oh my gosh.
Watch your step and watch out for loose beams and,
nails,
backhoes and crane parts and whatever else is down there, man. But
it's going to be interesting.
Looking forward to hearing your account of what happens when we get back next week. And no emergency podcast to speak of yet.
Let's not have that. Let's not have
that. We did that last year. That's the first and only emergency podcast, I think. In the history.
Yeah, we've never had. I thought I texted, I think, in the group chat toward the end of that first half against EKU, like, oh shit, it might be happening, guys. But luckily it didn't get there.
That's it. It was Vandy last year when we did.
Yeah, like 12:30 in the morning. You were up in Green Bay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So with that, we'll put a bow on this episode. Hope everybody enjoys it. Keep subscribing to the YouTube. Check us out on the live. I see it blue. If you missed us now, they always put the episode up on the site with different links to the audio and the YouTube as well. So we appreciate them for that. Appreciate everybody for listening. Appreciate Jalen Whitlow and Aaron Gershon. And we'll be back again next week to do this very same thing on Believe in Kentucky. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the games. Let's go 1-0 in the SEC. Let's go, Cats.